Welcome to Starbound. My name's Chikondi, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Frerin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now let's get into today's story. Greetings, Dirtlings! Rise and shine for another beautiful day in the middle of nowhere! Ricky Maven's voice crackled through the speaker above Esperanza's narrow bunk, that same theatrical boom that had pulled her from sleep for 3 years running. She rolled sideways, vertebrae popping like bubble wrap, and fumbled for the coffee pot. The brew had been percolating since 0400, strong enough to etch metal by now. The smell hit her like a friendly slap. Burnt beans, the sharp scent of the hot heating element, and that particular staleness that came from air recycled through 1,000 filters. Her tablet showed today's maintenance roster in unforgiving blue light. Fabricator Bay 7, bearing replacement, estimated 2 hours. Nutrient recyclers, full recalibration, banks 1 through 6. Outer airlock seals, pressure test before the weekly supply run. Nothing that would kill anyone if it waited. Nothing that would stop her hands from trembling if she sat still too long. She pulled on her coveralls, tan fabric gone soft as tissue from industrial washing, her name embroidered on the pocket in thread that used to be orange. The halls of Hab Block 7 echoed with Ricky's patter as she made her way to the communal kitchen. And that was Take 5 by the real Dave Brubeck, recorded way back in 1959. For those keeping track, that's 268 years ago. Makes you think, doesn't it? Speaking of thinking, reminder that tonight's poker game has been moved to Recreation Bay 3. Novak's still banned after last week's incident with the marked cards. You know who you are, Dimitri. The kitchen hummed with morning ritual. Olsen hunched over her tablet in the corner, scrolling through hydroponic yields with the focus of a bomb technician. Her gray hair fell in a perfect curtain, blocking out distractions. Zhang had commandeered half the communal table, diagnostic printouts spreading like technical kudzu while he muttered about signal degradation in the primary array. His fingers traced sine waves on the paper, leaving coffee stains at the peaks. Novak, speak of the devil, held court by the food processors, using a protein bar like a conductor's baton. 0.01%. His voice boomed over the morning chatter. 0.01! Minuscule! Nothing! But in a planet cracker, he whistled through his teeth, would have turned the whole retrieval squadron into vapor. Not debris, vapor. Gone like they never existed. Good thing Valdris got it, eh? Esperanza drank her coffee and headed for the exit before he could drag her into the story. The K7 incident was 2 months old. Everyone knew their part by heart. Morning, Valdris. Zhang looked up from his printouts. You heading to Bay 7? Bearing won't replace itself. True. He tapped a sine wave. When you're done, could you look at the transmitter coupling in Array 3? Getting a persistent ghost signal in the feedback. She nodded, already calculating the time. Bearing 2 hours. Recyclers 3 if nothing fought her. That left maybe an hour for Zhang's transmitter issue before the airlock tests. A full day. A good day. The kind that left her exhausted enough to sleep without dreams. Fabricator Bay 7 squatted in the industrial sector's heart like a metal cathedral. The air tasted of coolant and old grease, with the acrid tang of overworked ionizers that meant the atmospheric processors were due for cleaning. Again. The bearing assembly hung 15 feet up, accessible only by a ladder that someone had welded together from salvage 40 years ago. Each rung bore a different pattern of rust. Esperanza climbed steady, her tool bag a familiar weight on her hip. The tremor in her hands vanished the moment she wrapped her fingers around the first rung. Tools and machinery didn't care about age or memory, or the empty spaces where daughters used to live. They just needed proper maintenance. The bearing housing opened with a pneumatic hiss. The worn component inside looked fine to the naked eye. Smooth, silver, unscored. but she could feel the microscopic pitting when she ran her thumb across the surface. Another month and it would have started to wobble. 2 months and it would have seized entirely, taking the whole fabricator offline. She worked, the distant hum of other machinery the only sound. Disconnect power coupling. 3 turns counterclockwise, not 4. Never 4. Release pressure seals. Top first, then bottom. Let the gas bleed out slow. Extract worn bearing. Straight pull, no twisting. The housing tolerances were tight.
Valdris to maintenance control.
She keyed her comm with a clean knuckle.
Bay 7 bearing extracted. Installing replacement.
Copy that, Esperanza. The duty officer today was Henriksen, who'd been running boards longer than anyone. How's she look?
Another month and we'd have been scraping metal shavings out of the housing.
Preventive maintenance saves lives. He said it like a prayer, which maybe it was. Recycler bank is all yours when you're done. The new bearing slid home with a satisfied click. She ran through the test sequence. Power on, slow rotation, listening for any hint of grinding or resistance. The fabricator purred like a contented cat. Good for another 10,000 hours, give or take. The nutrient recyclers ran along the habitat ring's inner wall. 6 massive cylinders that turned human waste into something approaching food. Not the most glamorous system, but it kept 3,000 people from starving. The recalibration was delicate. Each unit had to process within a 2% tolerance. Their chemical curves matched like dancers in a very unpleasant ballet. She was elbow deep in Recycler 3, adjusting the enzyme injection rate, when her comm buzzed sharp enough to make her jerk. Her wrench clanged against the housing. All maintenance personnel, report to Community Center for emergency briefing. Pause. Repeat. All maintenance personnel to Community Center immediately. Ricky's music cut out mid-song. Esperanza had been listening with half an ear, a saxophone solo weaving through piano chords, the kind of thing her father would have liked. The silence that followed felt wrong, like finding a missing tooth with your tongue. Folks, I'm getting some, strange readings on the long-range communications array. Ricky's voice had lost its morning polish. She could hear him swallowing, buying time. Might want to take a look at the sky. Eastern horizon, about 40 degrees up. I'll keep you posted. Esperanza abandoned her tools and headed for the nearest exit. Other workers were doing the same, converging on airlocks with the swift, focused movement of people who had rehearsed for disaster. Nobody ran. Running in a pressure suit was a good way to die stupid. She stepped through the main lock and her breath stopped. A dark mass hung against the stars where nothing should be. Not a ship. Ships had edges, boundaries, shapes that made sense to human eyes. This was a world that had decided to go for a walk. Its surface was covered with interlocking channels, glowing from within like veins filled with soft, liquid light. It moved through their system without engine flare or gravitational wobble, as if physics were a polite suggestion it had declined to follow.
Mierda,
someone whispered beside her. Olsen, her face pale behind her helmet visor.
How big is that thing?
Esperanza didn't answer. The maths was already running in her head, and she didn't like the numbers. The community center was standing room only. 3,000 colonists crammed into a space meant for half of that, the air recyclers whining in protest. Administrator Cohen stood at the front, his young face the color of recycled paper. His hands shook as he raised a tablet, and Esperanza noticed he'd missed a button on his jacket. Third from the top, leaving the fabric bunched. I've just received our first communication from the... He glanced at the screen, swallowed. The buried saints. They've got a message. The air in the room seemed to vanish, drawn into 3,000 lungs at once. Cohen's voice found steadiness somewhere, the kind that came from training rather than confidence. Surface dwellers of the third planetary body, you contaminate the sacred ziridium streams that flow from your star. This system feeds the deep gardens of the faithful. Depart within 10 rotations of your star or face purification. This is the only warning the buried saints will provide. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the room exploded. 10 days! Novak's voice boomed over the chaos. 10 days to move 3,000 people! What the hell is a Ziridium stream? Can't possibly expect us to... Industrial ships, not passenger... Please! Cohen raised both hands, his youth showing in the gesture. I'm drafting a diplomatic response. We'll explain our situation, request assistance with the evacuation. Request assistance! Novak pushed through the crowd, his bulk parting the sea of bodies. From beings who call us contamination. You think they give a damn about our situation? We have to try. Cohen's earnestness was painful to watch. Surely they'll understand. We can't simply abandon... They understand perfectly. Esperanza didn't raise her voice, but it cut through the noise like a welding torch. Look at the numbers. 3,000 people. 10 days. Our fastest hauler makes the run to Proxima Station in 18 days, and that's empty. They know we can't evacuate. The room turned to her, hundreds of faces looking for something she couldn't give them. Hope, maybe, or a clever solution that would make the math work differently. This isn't a warning, she continued, each word deliberate as a hammer blow. It's a countdown to extermination. They're giving us time to make peace with whatever god we prefer. Nothing more. Cohen's diplomatic response was a masterpiece of bureaucratic hope. He explained New Hebron's history, their population of mostly retired workers, their lack of passenger vessels. He requested temporary shelter, offered to relocate voluntarily if given assistance, proposed cultural exchange programs, kitchen sink diplomacy, throwing every possible solution at the wall. The buried saint's response arrived in less than an hour. No negotiation, no compromise. Just star charts showing optimal departure vectors and tidal calculations for their evacuation. The calculations of leaving, nothing more. When Cohen sent a follow-up requesting clarification on temporary shelter options, the reply was 2 sentences. Purification admits no compromise. You will leave or you will be made clean. That night, Esperanza found herself in Ricky's broadcast booth. He'd switched from music to continuous updates, his voice the steady heartbeat of a colony trying not to panic. The booth was cramped, packed with equipment that had been cutting edge 40 years ago. Coffee? He didn't wait for an answer, just poured from a pot that looked older than both of them combined. The brew was weaker than hers. He added sugar, the heathen, but she took it anyway. You've been monitoring their signals. Not a question. She could see the analysis running on his secondary screens, waveforms and frequency distributions. Ricky nodded, fingers flicking switches and sliding worn faders. Most of it's religious broadcasts. Purification doctrine, sacred geometries, the sin of surface dwelling. It's comprehensive. They really believe we're contaminating something fundamental about this system. He isolated a frequency, boosted the gain. But listen to this. Alien voices emerged from static, their language incomprehensible, but their tone unmistakable. It was an argument, voices overlapping, interrupting, growing heated before being cut off by what sounded like a moderator. The encrypted channels sound different, Ricky continued, like a debate. Some of them aren't happy about the timeline. There's one voice who keeps using the same phrase, shows up in discussions about civilian evacuation procedures. Doesn't matter if they're not happy, only matters what they do. Maybe. Ricky adjusted another dial. But it might mean we're not dealing with a unified front. The loudest voices want us gone, but the loudest voices aren't always... Every piece of equipment in the booth shrieked at once. Screens flashed white, speakers screamed feedback, and Ricky yanked his headphones off with a curse. When the systems recovered, every display showed the same image. Sentry, their smaller moon, captured in perfect detail. The next frame was empty space and an expanding cloud of fragments that sparkled like broken glass. 6 rotations remain. The text appeared in stark white on black. Choose wisely. Esperanza set down her coffee with deliberate care. Her hands were still. Well, Ricky said after a long moment, I guess they can back up their threats.
Never doubted it.
She stood, knees protesting.
I need to check something in the maintenance archive.
Esperanza. His voice stopped her at the door. What are you thinking? She looked back at him.
I'm thinking about what a calibration error can do to a planet cracker.
His face went very still. That's not what those are for.
No,
She agreed.
they're not.
The planet cracker schematics covered her workbench. Esperanza had pulled them from deep archive, documents that hadn't seen light since Kahari Mining Corporation abandoned New Hebron for richer fields. The specifications were brutally simple. Gravitational pulse generator, contained fusion power source, a targeting grid capable of locking onto any sufficiently large mass within half a light second. The K-7 unit squatted in Maintenance Bay Alpha like a dormant giant. 60 meters of focusing arrays and power conduits, all wrapped around a fusion bottle that could generate temperatures found only in stellar cores. She'd run diagnostics herself after the calibration incident. The focusing array could tighten a gravitational beam down to 0.78 meters. The power output, enough to crack a Class 4 asteroid, would punch through a world ship's hull like a bullet through paper. She stared at the numbers until they blurred. A planet cracker didn't care what it cut. Rock or metal or bodies. The physics were identical. Input, power and targeting data. Output, destruction measured in gigatons. Thought I'd find you here. Ricky stood in the doorway, 2 cups in hand. Dawn light filtered through the bay's high windows, painting long shadows across the industrial floor. She hadn't noticed the night passing. He set a cup beside the schematics without comment. They sat in comfortable silence while the coffee cooled. Outside, she could hear the colony waking. Footsteps in corridors, the distant clang of a pressure door. Life continuing despite the countdown that ticked in everyone's head. I've been getting reports, Ricky said eventually, from other systems. Every colony that received this message has gone silent.
Evacuated?
Or purified. He sipped his coffee, made a face at the temperature. No way to know. The last transmission from Haran Colony was a distress beacon that cut off mid-signal. She looked at the schematics again. Such simple machines, beautiful in their functionality. The focusing array was a work of art, its layered optic structure designed to channel forces that could reshape matter itself. The same elegance you'd find in a good wrench or a well-balanced hammer. Tools didn't have morality.
We have weapons,
She said. We have mining equipment.
Same difference to the dead.
Riley was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its radio polish. You know what's on that world ship. It's not just soldiers or zealots. I've been parsing their transmissions. They talk about their children's education programs. They have concerts, poetry readings. There's a whole show about maintaining their gardens. Actual gardens, where they grow things in the dark.
I know.
Engineers like you. People just doing their jobs, following their leadership.
I know.
And if we... He stopped, started again. God, Esperanza, we'd be talking about killing who knows how many people. Civilians, children who had no say in any of this.
Yes.
The word came out flat, matter of fact.
We would.
How can you be so calm about it? She turned to look at him fully. Ricky Maven, who'd never missed a morning show in 20 years, who knew everyone's birthday and played their favorite songs without being asked, who'd held this colony together with bad jokes and good music and the promise that some things stayed constant.
Because,
She said slowly,
in 5 days, those same children will watch their parents purify us. They'll learn about it in their schools, the day the surface contamination was cleansed. They'll grow up knowing their God demands the death of anything that lives under whatever star they deem is theirs.
She gestured at the schematics.
I'm not calm, Ricky. I'm doing math. 3,000 of us. A whole planet of them. The numbers are what they are.
That's cold.
Cold keeps the processor running.
She turned back to the schematics.
Hot makes you stupid, and we can't afford stupid right now.
The argument that split the colony started in Committee Room 3 and spread like a contagion. By the second day, you couldn't walk down a corridor without hearing voices raised in anger or anguish. Families divided, work crews fractured. The comfortable routine of New Hebron shattered like Sentry had, suddenly and irreversibly. In the community center, the formal debate raged for hours.
We're talking about genocide!
Dr. Yuan from medical stood at the podium, her voice cracking.
We'd be no better than the worst butchers in human history!
We're talking about survival! Novak shot back from his seat. They made the rules. Leave or die. We can't leave.
So we become murderers?
So we become extinct? Back and forth, around and around. Ethics versus pragmatism. Morality versus morality. Cohen tried to moderate, but his diplomatic training was useless here. He kept returning to frameworks and procedures while the colonists wanted answers to questions that had no good answers. On the fourth night, with time running out and the arguments exhausted, Esperanza stood before the assembly. She'd avoided the debates until now, spending her time in the maintenance bay, running diagnostics on equipment never meant for war.
You want to know if it's wrong to kill them?
She said without preamble.
Of course it's wrong. It's murder on a scale that makes every human atrocity look like a rounding error. We're talking about cracking open a world full of people whose only crime is following their leadership.
A murmur ran through the crowd, surprised that she'd conceded the point so readily.
But they're going to kill us.
She let that sink in.
Not maybe, not probably, definitely. In 4 days, we'll be dead or scattered. Our children...
She stopped, swallowed. Some words were harder than others.
The children here will be corpses or refugees. That's not speculation. That's fact.
But we could still evacuate some people, someone called out. The shuttles!
Can move maybe 300 people to the nearest station before the deadline. Who chooses? Who stays behind to die?
She scanned the room.
Show of hands. Who volunteers to stay?
Silence.
That's what I thought.
She turned to the schematics displayed on the main screen.
These planet crackers could cut their world ship in half. It would take 6 hours to power up, 30 seconds to fire. We have the knowledge. We have the equipment. The only question is whether we have the will to be monsters so our children can be alive. You're asking us to damn ourselves,
Dr. Yuan said quietly.
Yes,
Esperanza agreed.
I am, because damnation is better than extinction. You can hate yourself tomorrow. You can't hate yourself if you're dead.
The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The planet cracker would be prepared. While Esperanza and her team worked on the weapons, Cohen threw himself into a different preparation. If they were going to commit genocide, they'd also commit to rescue. The young administrator attacked the problem like he was planning a colonial expansion, not a war crimes aftermath. Convert every ore hauler for emergency medical transport, he told his staff, who looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Calculate life support requirements for the alien biology. Their broadcasts mention atmospheric preference. The processing facilities can be turned into temporary shelters.
You're planning to save them?
His aide, Thompson, couldn't hide her disbelief.
After what they're forcing us to do?
We're choosing to do it, Cohen corrected, and for the first time since this started, he sounded like a leader instead of a boy playing at one. And yes, we'll save everyone we can, not because they deserve it, because we need to deserve surviving. The preparations were frantic. Mining shuttles stripped and reconfigured. Crash courses in zero-gravity rescue procedures. The fabricators worked overtime, producing emergency suits that might fit alien physiologies. Nobody slept much. There wasn't time. And besides, sleep brought dreams nobody wanted to have. Esperanza lived in Maintenance Bay Alpha, fine-tuning the weapon. The K-7's focusing array needed fine adjustment, meaningless for asteroid work, critical for what she planned.
Variance in the focal length could scatter the beam,
she explained to her volunteer team, Gomez, Rosario, and Old Muller, who'd worked planet crackers since before she was born.
We need a clean cut. One shot, maximum damage, no second chances. Clean,
Rosario laughed, but it was bitter.
Nothing clean about this. Clean as we can make it,
Esperanza said.
We owe them that much.
Every connection was checked and rechecked, every calculation verified. She found herself thinking of her grandfather, who'd taught her to weld when she was 12. Measure twice, cut once, he'd said, and if you're going to do something, do it right. He'd been talking about joining pipes. The principle scaled up. 3 hours before the deadline, Esperanza made one final attempt. She commandeered the primary communications array, broadcasting on every frequency the buried saints had used, not as a diplomat or colony representative, but as one engineer to another.
This is Esperanza Valdris, New Hebron Colony. I'm transmitting the technical specifications of our planet cracker array. You need to understand what these machines can do.
She fed the data stream directly from her workstation. Power curves, focal lengths, energy outputs.
Gravitational pulse generator. Focused beam width 0.78 meters. Energy output sufficient to crack a Class 4 asteroid or the superstructure of your world ship.
She paused, knowing the transmission lag meant her words were already racing toward their destination.
We have 6 units operational. We will use them. You have 3 hours to withdraw. Use that time to launch escape pods, evacuate civilians, prepare for catastrophic decompression in your forward sectors.
Another pause.
I am not bluffing. I am not negotiating. I am giving you the same warning you gave us. The difference is, we're also preparing rescue vessels, because we're monsters, but we're not your kind of monsters.
The response came in 43 minutes. Surface dwellers cannot threaten those who dwell in sacred darkness. Your weapons are tools of contamination, powerless against the pure. Purification begins at the blessed time. She closed the channel. There was nothing more to say. Ricky's voice filled the colony, steady despite everything. All personnel to emergency stations. Weapons deployment in T-minus 60 minutes. Then, on all external frequencies, this is New Hebron Colony calling any ships in the outer system. We are about to engage hostiles with heavy industrial equipment. Recommend you clear the area and stand by for rescue operations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The colony held its breath. The rescue volunteers suited up, checking seals and oxygen supplies with the careful attention of people who knew they'd soon be pulling bodies from vacuum. The rest huddled in deep bunkers. Esperanza ran through the targeting sequence one last time. The K-7's systems hummed with terrible potential, fusion reactor stable at 98%, focusing array aligned to tolerances that would make a surgeon weep. She locked onto the largest gravitational signature, the world ship's core. One cut, through the middle. Maximum structural damage, maximum chance of survivors in the outer sections. She'd done this calculation 1,000 times, just different coordinates. At T-minus 10 minutes, she keyed the colony-wide comm. Her voice was steady, each word carved from stone.
This is Esperanza Valdris, Acting Defense Coordinator for New Hebron Colony. To the buried saints, you have demanded our extinction. We refuse. We will fire on your world ship in 10 minutes. Use that time to launch escape pods, evacuate your civilians, and prepare for rescue operations. We will save every life we can after we save our own. But we will not be purified. We will not go quietly. And if you make us choose between your children and ours, we've already chosen.
She waited, watched the countdown. Her hands on the control were steady as bedrock. The tremor that had plagued her for years was gone, as if her body understood that this moment required stillness. In the final seconds, she thought of her daughter. Would she understand? The question had no answer, only the certainty of the moment. Fire or die, kill or be killed. The oldest equation in the universe, dressed up in new clothes. At 14:27, New Hebron Standard Time, Esperanza Valdris fired. The gravitational pulse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effect was not. On every screen in the colony, the world ship came apart. The beam carved through the massive vessel like a scalpel through flesh, splitting it along a precisely calculated line. Atmosphere erupted from the wound in brilliant plumes, flash freezing instantly in vacuum. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull as power systems failed, each one a small sun that bloomed and died in seconds. Emergency lights flickered across the dying vessel, a constellation of panic and pain. Esperanza watched through the targeting scope, her hands locked on controls that no longer mattered. The deed was done. She had just murdered a world. The word sat in her mind, simple and true. Genocide. Genocide committed by Esperanza Valdris, age 67, former shift supervisor, daughter of teachers, mother of one. Her resume had just acquired its final entry. All available craft. We have massive casualties in sectors 7 through 15 of the target. Ricky's voice cut through her paralysis, professional despite the horror. All rescue vessels, begin search and recovery operations immediately. Move, people! Every second costs lives! The converted haulers launched in waves, their pilots pushing engines past redline. Mining shuttles and maintenance pods, never designed for rescue work, raced toward the expanding debris field. The same people who had voted for this action now risked their lives to save its victims. The next 18 hours blurred into a nightmare of desperate, focused action. Shuttle after shuttle returned with alien survivors, beings with pale, elongated limbs adapted for low light, their large eyes reflecting the harsh emergency lights. Some arrived in damaged escape pods, their occupants unconscious or worse. Others were pulled from failing habitat modules, atmosphere bleeding away with each passing second. The aliens weren't what anyone expected. No unified mass of religious warriors. Instead, they found teachers clutching children, engineers trying desperately to maintain life support in severed sections, artists who'd been in the middle of creating, families who'd been sharing meals when their world split in two. One rescue pilot reported finding a classroom module, 30 young aliens and their teacher huddled in the dark as their air ran out. The teacher had given her breathing mask to the smallest child. She was unconscious when they found her, minutes from death. The children were singing, some kind of hymn or lullaby, their voices thin in the depleting atmosphere. They saved them all, barely. Olsen's hydroponic bays were converted to emergency life support within hours. The clean, green spaces where tomatoes and lettuce had grown now housed atmospheric processors configured for alien biology. The plants were relocated or composted. Food was less important than breathing. Novak's ore processors, machines built to extract metal from rock, were repurposed as water purification systems. The aliens' internal chemistry wasn't that different. They needed water, just with different mineral content. Novak worked 18 hours straight, his big hands surprisingly delicate as he adjusted filtration parameters. Never thought I'd be saving the bastards trying to kill us, he muttered, then went back to work. Zhang's communication arrays became the nexus of the rescue effort. He coordinated 63 separate vessels, tracking their locations, directing them to the strongest distress signals, managing the logistics of a disaster too large for comprehension.
Pod cluster at bearing 27 Mark IV,
he called out, voice hoarse from hours of non-stop communication.
40+ life signs. Who's closest?
Holler 6 here, 8 minutes out.
Copy. Holler 6, be advised. That section's losing pressure fast. Use emergency procedures.
And through it all, Ricky's voice on the emergency channel, steady as a heartbeat. New Hebron control to all rescue craft. You're doing good work out there. Keep it up. Every life matters. Among the rescued was one who would change everything. Sitha Marenthis arrived in the 18th hour, pulled from a command module that had miraculously maintained pressure despite being severed from the main ship. She was conscious, walking under her own power despite injuries. When the rescue team brought her in, she insisted on speaking to whoever had ordered the attack.
That would be me,
Esperanza said. She'd left the weapon controls only to coordinate triage efforts, her coveralls now stained with fluids she didn't recognize. Human blood was red. Alien blood, apparently, was a deep purple that smelled of copper and garlic. Sitha stood 7 feet tall, her elongated frame adapted for the low gravity of their world ship. Her skin was pale as cave moss, marked with intricate scars that might have been decorative, functional, or both. When she spoke, her English was careful but clear, learned from intercepted human transmissions.
You destroyed my world,
she said simply.
Yes. You killed my people. Yes. And now you save the survivors. Yes.
Sitha studied her for a long moment, her large eyes, evolved for darkness, barely blinking in the harsh industrial lighting.
This is not expected. Yeah, well,
Esperanza was too tired for philosophy.
We could have shown you a thing or two about us under better circumstances. I am Sitha Morenthis. I am a seeker. We opposed the purification doctrine.
She paused, seeming to gather strength.
My faction believed coexistence was possible. We were betrayed, outvoted, overthrown. A lot of that going around. You joke after committing genocide. I process after committing genocide.
Esperanza met those dark eyes.
You want to kill me? Get in line. I've got millions of reasons to hate myself already. But right now, I've got wounded to triage and life support to manage. So either help or get out of my way.
Sitha was quiet for a moment. Then,
I am an engineer. I can help.
The next 3 days were a blur of desperate cooperation. Sitha proved as good as her word, her expertise invaluable in keeping the alien survivors alive. She worked with a focused intensity that Esperanza recognized, the look of someone processing trauma through useful action.
Your atmospheric processors are not designed for our biology,
Sitha noted during one 18-hour shift. They were reconfiguring Dome C's life support, trying to accommodate 300 refugees.
We require higher nitrogen content, lower oxygen, and the pressure. I know.
Esperanza pulled up the specifications she'd been working from.
Your broadcast included some biological data. We're doing our best with equipment designed for humans. I can modify the filtration system, if you permit. Permit?
Esperanza laughed, short and harsh.
Do whatever keeps people alive.
They worked in silence for a while, hands moving in the steady rhythm of competent engineers. Sitha's fingers were longer than human norm, with an extra joint that made her grip tools differently. But the work was the same. Components that needed connecting, systems that needed balancing, problems that had solutions if you were smart enough to find them.
My daughter was on the ship,
Sitha said suddenly. Esperanza's hands stilled.
She is 8 great cycles. She was in the education sector when you fired.
Sitha continued working, her voice steady.
That section maintained pressure. Your rescue teams found her class. All survived.
Esperanza started, then stopped. What could she say? Sorry I almost killed your child? Glad I failed?
She asks difficult questions now.
She paused.
I have no answers for her. Neither do I.
They worked until the life support stabilized, then moved to the next crisis. Always another crisis. But somewhere in those desperate hours, between shared tools and mutual exhaustion, a quiet respect began to form. Not forgiveness, the scale was too vast for that, but recognition. 2 engineers doing what engineers do, solving problems, saving lives, building something functional from the wreckage of catastrophe. On the 3rd day, Sitha made a proposal that stunned everyone. The alien survivors had been organizing, their natural hierarchies reasserting as the immediate crisis passed. 3 factions emerged: the Purifiers, who still believed in their doctrine, the Seekers, who had always opposed it, and a middle group trying to make sense of their new reality.
The world ship can be partitioned,
Sitha explained to the Joint Council, human leadership and alien representatives cramming into Committee Room 3.
1/2 maintains structural integrity. The Purifiers and their followers can take it, continue their journey, find an uninhabited system for their practices.
And the rest? Cohen asked. He'd aged years and days, but found something like authority in crisis.
We stay, if you will have us.
Sitha's words felt like bombs in the silence.
To help and build something new with those who destroyed us, but also saved us. Why?
The question came from Dr. Yuen, who'd opposed the attack but worked tirelessly in the rescue.
Why would you stay with us? Because,
Sitha said slowly,
destruction is not all you did. In our deepest scriptures, there is a teaching. The garden that survives both flood and drought grows strongest. We have survived the flood. Perhaps it is time to grow.
The debate that followed was heated, but different from before. Practical concerns dominated. Could the life support handle the population increase? How would they manage cultural differences? What about the language barrier, the biological needs, the 1,000 daily functions of 2 species learning to live together? But underneath the logistics was something else. Hope. Not the bright, easy hope of unmarred futures, but the complicated hope of people who'd seen the worst and chose to build anyway. Integration was messy, difficult, and often painful. 15,000 souls now call New Hebron home. The colony that had been repurposed for human retirement now stretched to accommodate a second species, their underground adaptations requiring massive infrastructure changes. Cultural misunderstandings were daily occurrences. The aliens' religious practices, even among the moderate seekers, involved concepts that translated poorly. Their art was auditory and tactile, experienced in darkened chambers that made humans claustrophobic. Their food required processing techniques that smelled, to put it mildly, unfortunate. But necessity bred cooperation. Mixed crews worked the industrial systems, human experience paired with alien innovation. The buried Saints engineering, evolved from maintaining a world ship through millennia, proved invaluable for expanding New Hebron's infrastructure. Human flexibility and rapid adaptation complemented the aliens' long-term thinking and meticulous designs. Ricky's radio show became an unexpected bridge. "Evening, dirtlings and deep dwellers," he'd begin, his familiar greeting expanded for their new reality. "Tonight, we're featuring a composition by Herath Sonorous. That's their stage name, folks, not trying to pronounce the real one on air. It's a 12-part piece that'll make your bones sing. Literally, in the case of our Deep Dweller friends. After that, some Patsy Cline, because the classics never get old. Children adapted fastest, as they always did. Within months, mixed groups played in the recreational areas. A human child teaching an alien child to draw with crayons, frustrated by fingers that bent differently. An alien child showing a human how to sense vibrations through the floor, a form of communication that bypassed language entirely. They invented games that required both species' abilities, excluding no one. But the shadows remained. Esperanza still woke at 0300 most nights, her hands clenched on phantom controls. The planet cracker in Maintenance Bay Alpha stood powered down but ready, a monument to necessary violence. Sometimes she found herself there, staring at the machine.
The hardest choices leave the deepest scars,
Sitha said one night, finding her there. The alien had taken to working late shifts, her species requiring less sleep.
but scars also prove survival. Pretty words won't bring back the dead. No, but the living still require tending.
Sitha's elongated fingers traced the control panel with something like reverence.
Your people have a saying. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. We cannot change what was done. We can only choose what comes next. You're awfully philosophical for someone whose world I destroyed. I am practical. Philosophy is how we make sense of the practical.
Sitha turned those large eyes on her.
You saved my daughter. You saved thousands. Yes, after killing many. But in that order lies something important. What's that? Choice. You chose destruction to save your people. Then you chose salvation for your enemies. The second choice. That is what makes you monsters worth knowing.
A year later, almost to the day, the long-range patrol vessel arrived. Earth had finally responded to the original distress call, sending Commander Hayes and the Vigilant to investigate. The ship appeared on the long-range sensors, broadcasting standard Colonial Authority identification codes, approaching with the casual confidence of humanity's military might. Ricky handled the initial contact with his trademark professionalism, but his words carried new weight. New Hebron Control to Earth Patrol 7. You're welcome to visit, Commander, but be advised we've had some changes in our community composition. Recommend you review our filed reports before landing. And Commander, mind your manners. We've got some very particular neighbors now, and they don't much appreciate uninvited guests. On the Vigilance Bridge, Commander Hayes pulled up the incident reports. His expression went from curious to confused to horrified as he read. The final notation came from the Joint Administrators. Cohen and Sitha Marenthis now shared the role, their names side by side on official documents. Their recommendation was diplomatic but firm. All future contact should go through proper channels, with appropriate cultural sensitivity training.
My God,
Hayes breathed, looking at the tactical assessment.
they turned mining equipment into... and then they...
He trailed off, staring at the casualty figures. A colony that had redefined itself through an act of apocalyptic violence and desperate mercy. Hayes filed his report with a notation that would become standard for similar cases.
Colony appears stable and self-sufficient. Recommend non-interference policy.
The message that filtered back to Earth was simpler, but carried hard-earned truth. New Hebron was no longer just another abandoned retirement colony. It had become something unprecedented, a place where humanity's darkest choice had led to its most unlikely alliance. In her quarters, Esperanza kept a small item on her workbench, a piece of hull plating from the destroyed world ship, gifted by a buried Saint engineer who had lost family in the attack but chosen to stay anyway. The metal was twisted by the gravitational pulse, its sacred geometries warped into new patterns that hurt to look at if you knew what they meant.
We are all different now.
the engineer had said through a translator. Bent by necessity into new shapes. Perhaps that is not contamination. Perhaps it is evolution. Sometimes, late at night, she held the twisted metal and thought about choices, about the mathematics of survival, about her daughter, who would never know what her mother had become, about Sitha's daughter, who lived because human rescue teams had raced into the void to save their enemies. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas played out in their light. But on New Hebron, 15,000 souls continued the harder work of living together, proving daily that crossing into human space required careful consideration, not because humans were monsters, but because they were something far more dangerous. Survivors who would do anything, even the unthinkable, to protect their own. And then, having done the unthinkable, they would offer their hands to help the very beings they had struck down. Because that too was human nature, complicated, contradictory, and absolutely committed to continuing. The planet cracker waited in its bay, silent and ready. Its message was clear to any who might threaten New Hebron again. We have done terrible things to survive. We will do them again if we must. But we would rather plant gardens in the dark with you instead. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.